Tonight, Donald Trump is declaring victory in the battleground state of Arizona after MAGA candidates and election deniers won big in their primary contests. Trump took the Truth Social to celebrate, calling last night's victories a complete sweep. Arizona is becoming a Republican state, he said. Congressman Andy Biggs won the Republican nomination for governor, setting up a November clash with Democratic incumbent Governor Katie Hobbs. He was first elected to Congress in 2016, and Biggs established himself as a hardline conservative who voted against the certification of Biden's election victory in 2020. Now, Hobbs is among the most vulnerable Democratic incumbents in the country after she defeated conservative firebrand Kari Lake by less than a percentage point in 2022. In another contest with significant stakes for how elections are held in Arizona, State Representative Alexander Kolodin won the nomination for Secretary of State. Kolodin was involved in multiple lawsuits challenging the legitimacy of the 2020 and 2022 elections in Arizona and represented fake electors in efforts to disqualify mail-in ballots. This seems like one of those things like you bite off your nose to spite your face kind of thing. Trump has a long history of choosing the more extreme candidates in Arizona, which is a particular state that is actually probably trending conservative, but has kind of made it clear that they don't necessarily want extremism.
Absolutely. I mean, congratulations for him winning a Republican primary. So excited for Trump. I mean, the fact that he has to put out a Truth Social post on that, I would think his candidate is going to win a primary. They're going to not do as well in the general election. Katie Hobbs, the current governor, was the Secretary of State at the time that Trump tried to attack the 2020 election. That was her kind of rise to fame and got her elected as governor. You know, I grew up in Arizona, and the Republicans there are like a more independent type of Republicans than in other states. John McCain's maverick Republicanism was a reflection of Arizona voters. It wasn't as if he imposed that on him. They very much believe in small government. This idea that they were trying to take away their vote, that doesn't bode well with Arizona voters. And here's the thing. He has 3 people he endorsed in the primaries: the governor, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General, all election deniers. He did this on purpose. Arizona, of course, has been a purple state. It will be in 2028. And those 3 positions are key to running successful elections. Just ask California, Rob Bonter, Shirley Weber, Gavin Newsom. Those 3 make sure to protect the citizens' right to vote. And so it's not an accident he did that.
I also wonder, TW, in another world in which Trump could stay on message and maybe he might talk about the economy, whatever, maybe they might skirt by. But he's going to make this election about elections. He is going to make it about that. So this issue is going to come up in that state.
It is. I'm of the opinion that if we're looking backwards to 2020 and that's becoming a campaign issue, we're not going in the right direction. I have no problem talking about election security. I have no problem talking about voter ID and the need for it, even a lot of parts of the SAVE Act. Those, I think, are fertile ground because I think they make sense to the average person. But make no mistake about it, it's not just election deniers who won in Arizona. Sheriff Mark Lamb, who was outspent 10-1, won by 17 points. More in the mainstream. Jay Feely, the former NFL kicker, he's going to be a very formidable candidate. Juan Ciscomani is back in the driver's seat. There are a lot of bright spots in Arizona, aside from the 2 folks you mentioned there who are election deniers. And Andy Biggs, by the way, has the full backing of Turning Point USA, and they're going to be hitting the ground hard, and so we'll see where it all winds up.
Well, the fact that Turning Point USA is endorsing candidates it should frighten Democrats because there is no infrastructure on the Democratic side that can rival what Turning Point is doing. And none of that is great for those of us who actually believe in free and fair elections and the truth, perpetuating a lot of propaganda on that side. All of those other bright spots in Arizona, that's great, except that Donald Trump doesn't care about them. He cares about the people, to Dina's part. Yeah, but he cares about, to Dina's point, the people who are in the positions that can influence the elections. The Department of Justice just announced they're sending monitors to Arizona. That's not by accident. Donald Trump is coming for our elections in the midterms and setting it up for 2028.
Right.
We know this. He's telegraphing
Wait,
it. And this is another example of him doing that by endorsing candidates that do not believe in free and fair elections and relitigating 2020 and conspiracy theories.
The fact that the one thing about talking about the future and projecting what's going to happen is that we tend to then neglect what is, to me, the biggest story, political story, how Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has made liars of the entire Republican Party. He had, when you ask a straight-on question, who won the election? If they can't answer that question, then everything else they're saying is BS. I just think that when the group think, it's like they've all had and I'm a Republican.
Well, it's a litmus test.
It should be at least.
You can't even get past the front door.
How did we get there? How did we get there, for God's sake?
It's not quite the entire Republican Party, because the people who objected were run out of town on a rail, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's not
As
how
we
many
saw
times
in
do
Arizona.
Arizona
Yeah,
voters
right,
have to
Governor
say the
Abbott.
same
Yeah,
thing.
Ask Senator Jeff Flake.
Or DC, yeah.
It's interesting
Jeff Flake.
Not
because
just Jeff
John
Flake.
McCain's
Yeah.
widow, Cindy McCain, and his son are actually both holding fundraisers for Katie Hobbs.
Well, they were censured by the Arizona Republican Party.
Yeah,
They
I
turned
mean-
on Doug Ducey. They turned on Jeff Flake. They turned on John McCain, the people who could win statewide. And by the way, this is what the president unleashed, the civil war in this party. Democrats, look to Arizona for your future. This is what it looks like when you get taken over by a branch of the party that has an ideological mission and is purging anybody who dissents. This is what it looks like. And it doesn't result in statewide victories. It results in chaos, confusion, and frankly, embarrassment for the rest of us.
Are we
who have to
going
watch
to
it.
we're going to relive the cyber ninjas? I mean, remember that fiasco? The cyber ninjas came in to do an election audit, and they went through all that rigmarole, wasted Arizona taxpayer money to find out that, guess what? Joe Biden actually got a couple more votes than Donald Trump did, and they didn't find any election fraud. I mean, this whole thing is asinine, but it's also very serious because this is a microcosm of what Donald Trump wants to do in other places, in swing states, in our elections. We have to pay close attention to what he's doing. I'm telling you, he's telegraphing this. This is serious.
And to your point about the lie, and the reason it's so dangerous is because I can't tell you the number of people I talk to now, Democrats, who don't believe our elections are fair. The more that he talks about the fact that 2020 is stolen, the more that everybody else parrots it, the more he tries to get people elected who parrots it. None of us are going to trust our elections, and that's the bedrock of our democracy.
Next here for us.